you very well, which is fine, I guess. Maybe better for me. um, Summer, after Sarah Gambito. I have a canoe that gives me therapy my insurance won't cover. The man I love calls from Colorado, unaware of my canoe. It offers a better kind of cognitive behavioral in very turquoise water. The man says his mother is dying, and I say, I know, but nothing is clear. I pay the canoe with my best Christopher Walken impressions. It becomes clear that Colorado is where all calls are from. How did I not know? He says his mother has a couple of months. The canoe says to eat 5 cookies, then canoe off the calories. He says he saw snow in New Mexico on the way to Colorado. I see how my past is a nun who knows a lot of state birds, and my future is a pancake-shaped abyss. He says his sister is having a child. He says it's snowing and his sister is pregnant and his mother is dying, so they probably won't be able to go on as many rides as at Disney. I say, okay, and I see, but neither is true. The sky shuts its geese-filled mouth. Between the canoe and me, there is no more discourse. I wait for him to come back. I wait for Colorado to go away. The School of Mourning and Letters. Assigned to flurries of dust, assigned to the dead middle of winter in West Texas, assigned to give assignments in a building called English, I walk to campus, rubbing flecks of night from my eyes. On my phone, the morning headlines spell crisis. The morning is picture after picture of the coiffed like cotton candy doom, the chalky, delirious face of our leader, endorsed by the KKK. Assigned him, assigned the season of K's and hard C's, I look up and see the dark birds called grackle congregating near English. I am caught in the winged weather above food court and student union. I listen to the grackle orchestra of unrelenting shriek. I study the blur of their long-tailed swerving, their bodies like comets, frenzied commas, yet unable finally to mark, to contain the wide blue Texas sky. Still, they try. Every beak and claw, every uncalm feather tries, as if the sky were the only fact left, as if the grackles have been told to memorize it, as if someone, someday, will ask them to speak it, this long blue sentence. Is the volume too low? Okay. Is the mic adjustable? Or should I project more? Both and.
I think we're good.
Okay, I'll project.
Okay.
Hello. Is this better? The School of Fury. As Robert Frost said, the best way out is always through. Or as Alanis Morissette said, the only way out is through. Or as I said, 8th grade was all Robert Frost and Alanis Morissette, because I had to learn who the important white people were. And we worship immigrant hardship instead of building a house more breathable. To read and remember and know and say so without the echo of an accent. When the white kids knew nothing about Marilyn Chen, when the white adults know nothing about Lawson Fusao Inada, when the 30-something white guy in poetry class says a poem is this, based on what a 70-something white guy once said. And everyone just nods and I want to say no and scream, and would Frost have called me a chink? And take everyone through the wound of it, through the cat with a hummingbird in its mouth, through my much desired, never fulfilled Halloween costume, which was the wheel from Wheel of Fortune. Through the night my father came to pick me up from a friend's house, through the early fall sidewalk, through Newton, Massachusetts, outside Boston, inside whiteness, through my enjoyment of the West Wing with white friends, through my father knocking on the wrong door, the neighbor's door, through the neighbor's door where you can hear them whispering, deciding to call the police because because who is the man at the door calling in a strange voice? Through my father almost getting arrested for trying to retrieve his son. Through later in the car, my father insisting you gave me the wrong address. Through don't ever give me the wrong address again. Through my imitations of Frost in 8th grade, which my teacher called impeccable. Throughout the town and every doorstep except ours, a little family of carved pumpkins. Through the happy, happy wounds of their faces. Through why don't you try not going to the wrong house next time? Through hugging my white friends goodbye. Yeah, see you in class because nothing was wrong. Let's see. I think I want to. We'll be gone after these brief messages. God stopped by in his magenta rowboat. I said, God, you have to stop stopping by. If you're never going to tell me the meaning of life. God said, life is meaningless. Well, language often means too much. My grandmother stopped by and said, no, the meaning of life is love, the kind that produces children. Why don't you have a girlfriend yet? My mother stopped by and said, look, he's busy with his studies. Stop asking. God got back in his turquoise steamship. Life is a joyful thing, he said. It's probably very good for you. This is a longer piece. It's set in April 2020. I think that's all you need to know. Winter. It's April, but still cold, could still snow, because that's what Massachusetts does. What do I do? Sleep too much, too little, write nothing, except another tweet about another article about the rise of hate crimes against Asians and Asian Americans. A text to a friend. This list of 5 things I love in no particular order: oak trees, men's calves, honey oolong milk tea with boba, the interrobang, a video in which a young Bjork says, you shouldn't let poets lie to you. Jay always sleeps too little. It's April, and where are the tests? In one dream, I get to go to the boba tea place and I get a house-sized serving of honey oolong milk tea with boba. It's difficult to carry back to the apartment, but I manage. I cry some nights. Jay holds me, says, I eat a bag of your hair, a code we developed one long ago night when I asked him, would you eat a bag of my hair? It's April, I'm telling my students, it's going to be okay. I tweet about a white checkout boy who is handing a receipt to a customer who sees me in line, who demands I step back, wait behind the red X on the supermarket floor. I thought it was my turn, apologize. Then while I'm still waiting, a white man crosses the red, steps up right behind me. The boy says nothing. It's April. Where are the tests? Maybe I should delete the tweet about the white checkout boy, the white man, and the red X. Was it racism? It wasn't getting spat on, kicked, punched, spat on, spat on, spat on. It wasn't an acid attack, but it wasn't a coincidence. Jay holds me, says, I eat 3 bags of your hair. It's April and the air tastes like rain, remembering snow. A student asks what to do when you're stuck. I suggest a list. I always suggest a list. Here I say I'll do it the same time as you. Another list of 5 things I love. Magnolia trees, men's nipples, the sea, not swimming in it, just being by it, the night sky, looking up into it, feeling of it, lists, lying about how they're in no particular order. It's April, and what the fuck? I consider Trump's lies versus mine, the government's lies versus the people's. Was my student asking about being stuck in her writing or in 2020? I tweet about a white cook working in a banh mi food truck, refusing to give me a box for my banh mi after seeing my hands on the still wrapped sandwich. I tell him the wrapping's not enough. I'm taking this on a long subway ride back home. He says we're not supposed to touch the food again and expresses concern for my safety, then hands a white customer's order back to her in the box she asked for, smiles at her. She smiles back. Another list of things I love in very particular order. Cherry trees, men's musky armpits, Lies that are my backstory of how exactly Bjork came to distrust poets, then used an E. Cummings poem as lyrics for one of my favorite shorter songs of hers. The way I don't care if heaven exists, so long as men's musky armpits do. The smallest words I tell my students can make a world of difference. Conjunctions like but, and, or, adverbs like then. How often then occurs in scenes like at the food truck, the lie the cook tells me, the truth he smiles at her, the reality that depends on the lie that there is only one pure truth. It's April, and when am I going to giggly hug my friends again? Every time I see Kung Flu on Twitter, I make a note to get another honey oolong milk tea once Kung Fu tea reopens. It's April, and I would eat 3 bags of Jay's hair too. Though lately, can't stop thinking about how he isn't the one whose food these other white men won't touch. I make a list of the white men I've dated, hooked up with, wanted. It's a long list. It's almost May, and where are all the Chinese American friends I want to guffawy hug in New York on the West Coast? I want to write about snow instead of my list of white men. Then realize I usually write silver to describe snow instead of white. The moon, too, silver or golden, and any bright light, just bright. The fact that I can't write white without thinking of my list of white men, of my first boyfriend, his bright white teeth, as he said, I like your eyes. They're not really chinky eyes. The way I said, thank you. Or my third boyfriend, how he liked to call my dick an egg roll, proudly called himself a rice queen. All the ways I said, thank you. Or all the dates with white men where I was just elated they didn't call themselves rice queens. Or the white professor who didn't call himself a rice queen but was always seen with younger Chinese men. Or the white professor who was always seen with younger Chinese men but didn't call himself a rice queen. How I was the younger man, had trouble calling myself Chinese. The fact that I can't write about the snow without writing about standing in it, still as a tree, wishing it would cover my entire body in a thick blanket of white, white, white. To realize some of my writing is just my saying to white men, look how lovable I am. How I've thought that being with a white man would whiten me, lighten my lonely. And actually, factually, being with some white men has blanketed me while covering me in lonelier. The fact that I love Jay for Jay, just as this country does. Most of this country does before learning he has a boyfriend. What percentage of this country loves me after reading my name, after seeing my face, after hearing me talk about my boyfriend? After a list of your loves, I tell my student who's feeling stuck, perhaps in every possible way, make a list of your questions, like, what is love? Is it just saying I'll eat 100 bags of your hair? Or is it also talking, continue to talk about the fact of his whiteness, my notness, how it is that I am an antonym for person, synonym for sickness? This one and a myriad before and mutations to come. Is posing all of this as a set of questions when you already know the answers a form of lying? Sure, it's May. I need this form of lying in order to spell the facts out, in order not to fall under the facts of the particular order of the world as is, in unordered love. In another dream, I get to go to my favorite restaurant in Los Angeles, which somehow is also my childhood apartment in Western Mass. There's the sporty smell of my boyhood shampoo. There's no food. Nevertheless, everyone's seated at big wooden tables with blue linen tablecloths, chatting away. The clink of champagne glasses, but no champagne, not one glass. And in the background, the beep burps of dial-up internet with no bulky Dell computer in sight. Mostly it's Chinese people, Chinese and Chinese American, some of them with non-Chinese partners, some of them queer, some of them with my face. I mean, at least 5 of them literally have my face. I sit down next to one, his eyes, my eyes. He smiles, not my smile, or not yet. I'll close with one poem. This is called Spring, Summer, Autumn, Winter. I pushed my face toward the sleeping radiator, I smelled a form of justice. I wanted to be a poet. I waved my living hands, dead coupons. I watched him brush his teeth. His teeth glinted gorgeous. I stumbled, cartwheeled. I said, I will always fight alongside you in the fight against Tartar buildup. I said, I will. I said, thank God without believing in thanks. I thought what my parents did, that wasn't poetry. I believed what white people said about my parents. I had to say, stop believing them. I suckled, pickled, made mistakes about octopi, wore a blue jockstrap and took pictures, accepted stickers of astounded apples from friends. I was a wind smooching another wind who had very good teeth. I was a name everyone in America thought they were saying right. Even he thought so. Then asked, is that right? I pushed my face toward the noisy radiator, its clang and labor and here. In bed, I touched his voice in his belly. I touched his goodnight. He said it always like it was important. It was important. I believed in the silver millennium. I said, Sailor Neptune, one day a poem for you. I said, Sailor Neptune, teach me the deep submerged, the submarine reflection, the thunderously turquoise hair. I was a name in America and would forget I belonged to my teeth. I dropped a single wish down the cavernous mailbox. He would ask, is that right? He would bring a single microwave donut on a blue napkin at dusk. He would leave me alone with my poems. Oh, if I could lick all your toes at once, I would write that poem. I loved him, I told him. I loved him, so told him about the dream. The dream starred my parents, stars of the death metal band's debut music video. They danced like everyone was watching. It was important. Their arms were poems. They said, so what if we misspell auditorium? So fucking what? We'll always say your name right. They pushed their faces toward me, their poems toward me. They leapt and thrashed. They were stars, stars, stars. I woke up weeping. Do you understand? I thought I could only fall asleep doing that. Thank you so much.
So I got a text that you guys are having a hard time hearing on Zoom. So I'm sorry if it's a little distorted, if you're not hearing everything really clearly. We're doing our best over here, so hopefully you'll be able to hear. We're working on it. Okay, thank you so much, Chen. That was really wonderful. What a great reading. Now we're going to hear from Kathy Fagan. Kathy Fagan is the author of Bad Hobby, out just yesterday from Milkweed. It was just named one of the most anticipated books for September 2022 from Lambda Literary. Her previous collection, Sycamore, was a finalist for the Kingsley Tufts Award. She is the author of 4 other collections, including The Charm, the National Poetry Series winning The Raft, and Vassar Miller Prize winner Moving and St. Rage. Her work has appeared in venues such as the New York Times Sunday Magazine, Poetry, The Nation, The New Republic, Best American Poetry, and the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day. She has received a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship and an Ingram Merrill Foundation Fellowship, and served as the Frost Place Poet in Residence. She is the co-founder of the MFA program at The Ohio State University, where she teaches poetry and co-edits the Wheeler Poetry Prize book series for the Journal and the Ohio State University Press. About Bad Hobby, Yona Harvey writes, Kathy Fagan startles her readers with the sheer range of her observations of poetry, of the natural world, of humankind, and of those curious visitors who haunt our memories, the dead. While reading Kathy Fagan's poems, I am inhabited by a sharp nostalgia and melancholy, an ache that is usually just beyond description. The clarity in which she writes about her past and the insight she offers on everything, from the way the morning sun feels on one's back while grieving, to remembering her father telling her never to smoke because it's a bad hobby, makes me remember moments with my own parents a little more acutely. Like in the poem Morning, to which I keep returning, Fagan writes, I walk out each morning, the sun on my back. It is not the hand of my mother. She is dead now. It is not the hand of my father. He is needy as a child and cannot think to comfort me. The heat between my shoulders reminds me of something, like the riddle beginning what and ending everything that would love you and kill you, but doesn't. Please help me welcome Kathy Fagan.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try to speak up for our at-home crowd over the roar of the train. My gratitude to Hudson Valley Writers Center and Jennifer Franklin for inviting me to launch Bad Hobby here with the wonderful poets David and Chen. It means a lot to me because this book is very much a memoir about my family, my parents and immigrant grandparents, and all of us spent many years of our lives here in New York, and it's always felt like home to us. Dedicated. The way I remember it, I caught beauty like a flu via handshake or high five or a thank you for your service between the guys at the VA. The one who lurched toward me, touching me, saying, you like poetry, more vision than question. The one who said, overhearing me correct my Korean conflict era dad, go easy, you won't have him long. Or the one who said, you watch him like a hawk, just let him go. In the molecular biology lab, each tank full of impossibly small fish bears a sign that says, you are responsible for your own deads. Plural, sure. The older I get, the more I am reminded of song dedications on the radio. I called cousin Brucey to send out I've Got You, Babe to my parents on their wedding anniversary. When he played them Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves, Bob and Marianne were understandably confused, but appreciative nonetheless. I myself have had 3 partners in my lifetime, and what I still love best about 2 of them is how I never had to explain that joke. There was all that time listening to radio or TV. TV turned internet. I wish I could dedicate those spent hours now to my mom so she could come back a while. She wouldn't have to know she was dead. Like we didn't know then how much time was passing. I would play with her hair like I used to and tell her stories until she began to doze off like she used to, waking only to say, I didn't ever know you loved me, Kath. You never wanted affection from us, Kath. Just like she used to. The wrong song, somehow the right song, playing on and on like a perfect virus. Forest. When I found the tick, I forgot the rules I'd read. With thumb and forefinger, I severed its body from mine, just wanting it out of me, as I've heard people say of babies and cancers. I felt a mix of tenderness and disgust for it then, like the twin streams of blood and water rinsing down the drain. That summer, I used English only to write poems and speak with my lover, yet the French insisted on speaking English to me. You visit Forêt? Asked the pharmacist in charge of medical emergencies like mine. I heard F-O-R-A-Y, forêt in a forêt. Non, I said, jamais. Not far from there, pears grow in bottles suspended from the trees to make a potent digestif. As long as the fruit remains submerged in the liqueur, the pear keeps whole indefinitely. When my mother locked me out, I was 2 and 3, I'd go to our willow tree, wrap myself in its whips,
stroke its many sharp eyebrows with my hands. The pharmacist asked me to remove my tights to see where the tick had lodged, not far from my crotch. Exposed like that, I thought I should feel more embarrassed than I did. I used to believe I had been preserved by something. Now I think I am the preserving spirit. With my leafy fragrance, sound of wings in the canopy, blood draining swiftly from the head as I look up, neither host nor guest, exile, speaking for one reason only, and the reason is love. How's everybody doing? Good. All right. Oh, excellent. That's great. Okay. This is called Animal Prudence. Mice drink the rainwater before dying by the poison we set in the cupboard for them. They come for the bird seed, and winter is so gray here, the sight of a single cardinal can keep us warm for days. We'll justify anything. And by we, I mean I. And by I mean we. With our man is the only animal who, and our manifest destiny, killers each of us by greater or lesser degrees. Instead of a gun or knife in my pocket, there are two notes. On which the dandelion reads one. I don't know what it means, but cannot throw it away. It is soft as cashmere. The other says coffee, chocolate, birdseed. I should be extinct by now, except I can't make it onto that list either. Like toothpicks made of plain wood, some things are increasingly hard to find. Even when he was a young drunk, going deaf from target practice, my father preferred picking his teeth to brushing them. My mother preferred crying. They bought or rented places on streets named Castle, Ring, Greystone, as if we were heroes in a Celtic epic. Our romanticism was earned and leaned toward the Gothic, but lichen aimed for names on gravestones far lovelier than our own. It seemed to last a long time, that long time ago. Finches pixelating the hurricane fences, cars idling exhaust, dandelions bolting from flower to weed to delicacy, like me. Egyptians prepared their dead for a difficult journey. Living is more, I was going to say more difficult, but just plain more will do. Imprudent, unlike art, always falling below or rising above the Aristotelian mean. In France, a common rural road sign reads, Animal prudence, purely cautionary. It has nothing to do with Aristotle, but offers sound advice nonetheless. These days, I caution my father more than he ever cautioned me. He hears his oral hallucinations better and shows greater interest. Sportscasters at ball games, revelers at the parties he insists on. He's got all his own teeth, so toothpicks must do the job. His pockets fill with them. There are always half a dozen rattling like desert bones in my dryer. I think of the mason who chiseled his face in the cathedral wall. He couldn't write his name. The yellow bouquets I'd offer my mother by the fistful also got their name in France. What is that? And a little music to accompany me. Sorry, this is the last couple of sentences. The yellow bouquets I'd offer my mother by the fistful also got their name in France. Dents de lion, meaning teeth of the lion. And Jennifer already told you revealed the mystery of what the bad hobby is. So I'll just go ahead and read the title poem. No, that's fine. It's so funny. Bad hobby. From his pocket, my dad pulls a roll of wooden toothpicks bound with a rubber band. We're driving to the VA to have his toenails trimmed, as we do every 3 months. A standing appointment, I used to say to him, but he no longer gets the joke, asking only why I can't do it myself. And why won't I? I've catheterized him twice, but can't bring myself to tend his feet. So like mine, wide with high arches, ballerina feet, my mom called them. None of us dancers. Now that he's lived with me for almost as long as he lived with her, I'm beginning to look like Mom, pissed. The podiatry techs, it's the truth. The podiatry techs are always good-natured, thanking Dad for his service, raising their voices when I remind them he can't hear. The big toenail on his left foot looks to be made of horsehoof. They cut and file, but never hurt him. Some vets smoke outside the building, waiting on rides. Don't ever smoke, Kath, Dad says. It's a bad hobby, scrambling his words, forgetting our ages and both our pasts. The toothpicks he saves and reuses, even when broken, he calls a bad hobby, and the drinking he once was well enough to do. Vets here age out at Korea. Most are Vietnam, Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan. Since the suspension of the draft, only the poorest of us serve. Like sports, the art of war holds little interest for me, though both are everywhere on display. And in theory, I get it. Offense, defense, spectacle, competition. The Renaissance painter Uccello was commissioned by a nobleman to paint the famous triptych of the Battle of San Romano, a skirmish really between city-states fought by mercenaries. More than the birds he was nicknamed after, he loved linear perspective, using mathematics to create a three-dimensional effect. The work hangs in 3 European countries now, in keeping with its divisive history, and is considered Uccello's masterpiece. Painted with egg tempera on poplar, it reminds me of the tarot, with its broken staves like toothpicks and sexy horses. The gold leaf's intact on the bridles, but the silver of the soldier's armor has oxidized, darkening to ghostly shades. My mother's hobby was painting, is how I know. Uccello's daughter, a Carmelite nun, was described by Vasari as a daughter who knew how to draw. None of her work survives. Hobby derives from a Latin diminutive for horse, from which we get hobby horse, as in one man's sport, another man's war. On the other hand, habit is defined as a sustained appearance or condition from habeo, meaning I have, hold, keep, known in some cases as hard to break or more useful broken, a spirit, a promise, a horse. I flew in yesterday, and like many of us, I haven't flown much these past 3 years. And I recognized yesterday as I was flying in, coming in over into Manhattan, that it's still a thrill and terror to be thrown around in the clouds. And I'm going to read the story of my first flight. The title is The Supreme Farewell of Handkerchiefs, and it's a phrase taken from a Stéphane Mallarmé poem. Otherwise, it has nothing to do with the poem. The Supreme Farewell of Handkerchiefs. My first time in the sky, I flew with my grandmother. She wore high heels. She'd come from the old country by boat, cleaned for a living, died before retiring from a factory job. The stewardess, also in heels, awarded me a set of metal wings, pin glued on the back. Some passengers received fresh decks of playing cards. It was just like the footage you see of flying in the 60s, except it was my real life. I wasn't scared, but held her hand anyway because I liked to, as we rolled, shuddered, and climbed, everyone and everything we loved below us, goodbye, goodbye. At first, clouds parted like cream, then bitch slapped our little plane good until we'd all had time to consider, some asking why, I imagine, some asking why not. How many times now has it happened? Holding hand after hand in the air, or pressing both my hands together, thinking of theirs, that one's bones, this one's thumbs, another's tremor, their grace, skin, temperature, pressure. Why not here, in sky that stays sky, flying like the birds I cannot stop writing into poems, no matter how many people say, enough with the effing birds. Actually, only poets say that. And we're lying because there's never enough for us. A juvenile sparrow hopped to our threshold, considered what it might find inside. Don't worry, baby, I said. We're okay. And with a sound like tiny cards being shuffled, it lifted its body back up to the sky. Just two more. This is called Latecomer. When I discovered playlists last Christmas, I made one for my mother, dead 3 years. It was easy. I just backed all the way up under the tree lights and listened to the background noise. Sure, there was something of the clutch, glove, and handkerchief about it, the sentimentality I thought once might kill me. But it was Christmas, and missing her was all that could hurt me now, or half what would. The other being the memory of her body, which made me. She was alone when she died, when she went cold, then rigid, then ash, the flesh and bones that held me, fed me, pushed me out too far or in too close, the bones from which the marrow was extracted twice, the bones she complained she couldn't see beneath our chub. Her skull I touched often beneath her curls, which I brushed to a burnished glow, her scalp releasing a few chestnut hairs so different from mine, and the scent of soap and something I thought of as grown-up woman. I stood behind her on the couch, straddling her shoulders with my legs, her head at arm's reach, until she fell asleep there. It must have been the Valium prescribed for her depression and anxiety, neither called those then. There are names for everything now. There are hearts you can illuminate for every song you wish to save. Memory is the only ghost. And this is the last one. I just want to thank everybody again for being here and there. In active fault with echoes. Rain won't fall, and won't. When I learned the word virga, I learned how full a cloud could be. Every word worth an extended visit. Visit meaning to both comfort and afflict. Small fingers falling, not falling, smaller even than curbside locust leaves. I had a wife once, Dad says. Whatever happened to your mother? There's a fault near here that hasn't moved in 30 years. We are our own seismic shift. Vertical lines on my fingers could be my mother's. Leaves don't change as much as crisp in this weather. Catalpa twists in place. We cause pain and relief from pain. The rain won't fall. Whatever happened to your mother was probably my fault, Dad says. Remembering is dangerous, he says, when I remind him. My small fingers once recoiled from amoebas pictured in the science book. The breasts of the women at his facility rest quietly on their bellies, ghost bellies, their elbow and earlobes. I lost her somehow, Dad says. The van there reads, Angels on Assignment. Catalpa twists in place. Its many green ears follow a voice as you leave. Visit me soon. I want the earth to lose us first. Thank you.
Wow, Kathy, that was really wonderful. Thank you so much for that wonderful reading. And thank you, Sophia, for hanging in there with us, and Christina for giving us updates on you guys out there being able to hear us. So very happy to hear that. Okay, we're about to hear David Baker now. David Baker is a poet, educator, editor, and literary critic. He was born in 1954 in Bangor, Maine, and grew up in Jefferson City, Missouri, and since 1983 has lived in Central Ohio. He received degrees in English from the University of Central Missouri and his PhD in English from the University of Utah, where he also served as editor and poetry editor of Quarterly West. Since 1984, he has taught at Denison University, where he is currently a teaching emeritus professor of English. He also serves frequently on the faculty of the MFA program for writers at Warren Wilson College and at writers' workshops around the country, including at HCWC, where he will be teaching a class on echo poetry on Zoom this Sunday. So if you haven't signed up yet, please do so now. After serving as poetry editor of the Kenyon Review for more than 25 years, he currently curates the annual Nature's Nature feature for the magazine. In the most recent issue of the Paris Review, Diane Seuss recommends Whale Fall and writes this: "The poems in David Baker's newest collection, Whale Fall, move me deeply. It strikes me that the purpose of craftedness, of exquisite and intentional madeness, is to create a kind of eternity in a poem. Maybe such a goal at this point in history seems unreachable," she says, "even romantic in the literary sense. But let us aim for eternity anyway. Keep walking, Pilgrim," Baker writes. "This is your great tale. The craft of Whale Fall defies. It asserts, for me, a definition of poetry, an unbearable gulf of feeling made indelible by form." The epigraph of David Baker's gorgeous book, Whale Fall, is, "Look how I am attached to the ends of things." This stunning collection is an elegy for the earth, for human beings in our time of late-stage capitalism and fragile democracy. But it is a book of patient observation, of careful devotion to beloved people and to our beloved planet. Nowhere is the feeling of being attached to the ends of things more poignantly depicted than in his poem, Turner's Clouds for Plumley. The poet and critic who wrote the luminous work, the posthumous Keats, quote, "We live in one time, but think in another." It may be in the dint of care that Baker takes in his observation, cataloging, appreciating, and translating the natural world and the relationships we forge while living here, that the real work of environmental activism is going to happen. Auden wrote that poetry makes nothing happen, but after reading Whale Fall, I am sure you will have a newfound drive to do what you can to join the fight to save our beautiful broken planet. Please help me welcome David Baker.
That was pretty gorgeous. So Kathy has a brand new book as of today, and it's wonderful to celebrate Kathy's new book. There you are, as of today. I've had it for a week or two. And Chen's book is so brand new, I don't even have a copy yet, but I'll remedy that soon. I love that Grackle poem. And my little book, which is 2 months old now, feels old. So I'm going to read my newest poem first. I love this train, by the way. You feel it in your feet and your rear, don't you? I love the train. So here's how new this one is. Yeah. And then I'll read 2 or 3 poems from Whale Fall. 6 notes. Come down to us. Come down with your song, little wren. The world is in pieces. We must not say so. In the dark hours, in the nearest branches, I hear you thrum. The deer come to die beside the creek. Mud the color of walnut stain. Reek and runoff from the new development there beyond the woods. Rib and skull. No jawbone. It makes a soundless scream. I hope for peace when I walk here sometimes in the dark. If not peace, clarity. If not clarity, at least a place to breathe. Else, I'll scream too. Come down, little dove, far above the bay. I hear you in a thirsty palm or up beyond the rocks, a windy reed of song. Blue sun, blue cloud above the sweeping bay. Sometimes we have to say so. I don't know how. A man, a boy, an anger with no tongue took his automatic rifle to school today. The report we hear, discharge, echo, is the sound of sorrow reloading. No matter where we walk, we hear it call. Little wing, little creek, little bay, dark hour, come down with your beaks of mourning and blood. So over Memorial Weekend, that's 3 days, just there were 15 mass shootings in America. I don't know what to do about that. Write a poem. I'm so grateful to be in a room full of poets again. It freaks me out a little bit. I know a lot of you, and I'm really grateful to see real people who've come sometimes from a long way to sit in a little room on the river here and sing to each other and listen, you know, to us sing to each other. I'm grateful to be with you. And especially to Jennifer for this amazing place that she and her colleagues are making and the remarkable programs here. So many things. It's a lucky thing. I'm just kind of grateful to be anywhere. So here's a little poem. I have this new book and I'm going to read 2 or 3 poems from this new book. This is the first poem in the book and it's just a little one. Though it's about a big thing. It's about a glacier. Or it's about melting. The telling. Down from such heights and up from depths beyond measure, the old ice slowly, now quicker than the stones can hold it, knows its path like the one note of a bird flown beyond us in ages since we've forgotten the wind holds us in its heavy sleeves. So sorry now at the pace of our elders' tongues. Down the valley it is going. The clocks have stopped. It is happy to be finished. Almost there, singing the song no one heard the last time either, when the rains began. There was a little glacier in Iceland, Myrdansirkut, where I've visited with my sweetheart, Paige. There's a glacier in Greenland. I was just reading, I can't stop reading about the glaciers. There's just one of the glaciers in Greenland, in northwestern Greenland. It's melting at the rate of, ready? 6 billion tons of water a day. That's, I did the math, 12 trillion pounds of water a day produced by the melt. What do you do about that? So I'm here with my sweetheart Paige, and I'm here in this room with my dearest old poetry friend in the universe, Terry Hummer, and one of my dearest old students, David Zibin, and friends from all over. I'm really grateful. I mentioned that before, right? It continues to be true. So here's a little bit longer poem. So do you remember the first time you saw a depiction of the coronavirus? Remember that the first like picture that somebody drew, or the electron microscope thing? I thought it was so beautiful and weird. With the, it looks just like, I went out in my yard. This is a sweet gum. Yeah. Passed on. Everywhere after I saw that depiction, everywhere I looked, I saw that shape. And I wrote a poem just about that kind of duplication, multiplication of that form, that natural form, which is a really successful form. So this is a poem where there are lots of voices and lots of things get redone. The word barn gets used in 3 or 4 or 5 ways. There's a doctor talking. There are people with a viral illness. It's a hard poem to hear. That's kind of why I'm saying this stuff. "19 spikes. Then the storm came. It raked our world with terrible teeth, then dissolved like calcium spikes back into bone. I see what you mean, but your barn's not really a barn. Old lady just sat there, married to the guy 50 years. Wash your doorknob, your hands, triage your mail. I had a nightmare I was living my present life. Can't touch my nose. It's called resorption. What? It throbs like crickets in my ears. Your BP was what? No touching. COVID pedals. She said, wash your hands. It took his body hours to work down through the corn, the quicksand weight of it. Her in her folding chair, him with a new auger for the bin he sort of spilled out. So the viburnums full of little pink blooms, bees in orbit with their spikes, their barbs, poisons, perfumes, then the hail balls, jagged as kidney stones, half a foot of rain, trees seemed to blow up, then the whole thing, whoosh. Some natural forms are so successful, they're viral. Calcium nodes on your clavicle. I see them everywhere. How small can they get? How big? Any size explodes. Is it gas? You mean the barn? Was it gas? A heat storm. One barn equals a non-SI metric unit of area equal to 10 to the negative 28 meters squared, or 100 femtometers squared. To quantify interaction of a nucleus with an electric field gradient. And branchlets are pithy, many-angled, winged, liquid amber stracifolia, surrounded by rusty, hairy bracts. Looks like a tiny naval mine. Between 80 and 120 spikes, terminal barbs, a special form of moored contact mine, and equipped with a plummet. He fell right through. The spikes on the outer edge of the virus particles give coronaviruses their name. Sweet gum, storax, red gum, star-leaved alligator wood, limpet mine. In place of torpedoes, the silos carry 12 charges. I heard my heartbeat in my bones. A positive kill rate. Airbnb, missile silo fixer upper, now swanky bachelor pad. Storm shelter, a storage bin, your ultimate safe room. Each virus is a single pleomorphic spherical particle. Satin walnut with bulbous surface projections. I see what you mean. Wash your hands. Like that really helps. Leaves ripped clean off. It's coming back. I know. So I think maybe two more here. Do we have time for two more? Is that good? Five more? I know. We'll do two more. Hold hands. Oh, okay. Little backstory, I guess. I started this poem when I found out that the United States government was taking the children of undocumented immigrants away from their parents and keeping them at Fort Sill in Oklahoma behind barbed wire. I say that in the past tense. There may still be some there. We were doing this in 2014, 2015, more recently. Fort Sill, where in the late 1940s, we interred Japanese American people behind the same barbed wire on the same ground at Fort Sill. We did that. Fort Sill, where in the late 1860s, early 1870s, as we were fighting what we called the Indian Wars, we took hundreds and hundreds of Native American people, indigenous Americans, and put them behind those same bars. It's another one of the, I mean, what you have. Is there any place where we are not culpable? Is sort of the question of the poem that just begins as a love poem. Hold hands. We were in the trees. White curtains opened. Your shoulders in my hands, then your knees drew upward, rain like petals there. Rain like breeze. Now the birds were in the trees 2 stories up our window, where blowing leaves were level with our sheets. We were in the street. We were holding hands as hands were holding us. What hands there were where we were, in trees. Our children there, as songbirds were. The hands where we were in the trees were holding us there, where we were in the street. Please the rain to please the petals in the breeze, like rain. Please to draw your hair along my hands. Your hands are holding us. Lines along the window lane are holding us like songs, as now the songs, the sirens in the trees, lines along the window lane. Your hair in feathers where the children are, whose curtains singing, whose hands are holding us, who cry like birds. Hold hands. The birds are in the trees. The birds, our children, there in cages, singing in the trees. So one last poem. This one's a little bit older. This one's 4 years old or so, but I'm reading it for a friend who's on Zoom with us tonight. Who asked me to read it. So before I read it, I will thank you for taking the train, car, whatever, however you got here, for coming out on a middle of the week to sit in a little room and be with each other and say things that we don't say usually, or sing songs. This is a poem called Checkpoint. Starts with a line from an Emily Dickinson poem, a poem that she wrote in 1859, started in 1859, just this time of year. It was autumn, and it was a poem about birds and migration. I'm thinking of Kathy's birds and Chen's birds. So this has some birds. It starts with this Dickinson line. She knew the birds. A checkpoint is also, of course, a military position where we do or don't permit people entrance into this or that place. And there are some questions in this poem that I have derived from a pamphlet that was put together to distribute to, again, undocumented immigrants in case they were taken by ICE or the immigration police, and the kinds of questions they might expect to be asked to be tripped up. That checkpoint too. These are the days when birds come back. These are the days, the birds. These days, these birds, these days are these birds. Let us see these days, these papers. When are these birds? And where are your papers? Where are you going? Come back, answer me where you are going. Behind the barn, the flame tree, our fire, our wings, these birds, behind the trees, the bursting winds, the birds, the days come back. They do not. There, what color is your ruby throat, your toothbrush? Yellow-breasted warbler, green flame, blue jay, marsh thrush among the light, the lush, low, timid leaf, she said, by the river, what fire is your nova, is your wife's hairbrush? Take your shoes off, take your hands off, stop right there. So many coming over, as so many millions, fewer wings. These papers of fragile bones vanished, they are not. Where are you going? I said, come back. So thank you, everybody. I was going to say, celebrate with me, Kathy and Chen's new book. Yeah.
Just to
Okay.
do a quick Q&A, and
Okay.
then we'll have everybody sign.
Cool.
Okay.
Yep.
Does anyone want to leave us off with a question for this amazing group? Oh, so did you all get together and decide for
We just like them, I guess. Poets usually, they like birds.
We also complain about
Yeah.
birds in their poems. Yeah.
That shuffling cards image though, wow, that was beautiful. That was in my ear. No, we didn't plan it.
We have one from Zoom. Sophia said that Helene Fisher has this question for Chen. I'd love Chen to talk about narrative forms and how
he uses them in work like Winter. Poems with long sentences that where each sentence is its own stanza.
Yeah.
She just wanted you to kind of, did you invent this and how did you, what are you following, or is it, what is your reason for using that?
I'm over here on the camera.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not invent it. It came out of, I can say, like two places. One is when I was looking at reviews of my first book, which was kind of nerve-wracking, but a lot of people pointed out how much I used anaphora in that book. And I was like, great, yeah, I meant to do that, but also now I'm really self-conscious about it. But it did get me thinking about kind of pushing the sentence further and playing with syntax. And so the form, I mean, some of that was inspired by Sarah Gambito, who does in some of her work, some of Ocean Vuong's new book, some of Solmaz Sharif's new book. So I was thinking about, some of those poems before the books came out, about trying to force myself to really pay attention to the sentence in new ways. So that was part of where that form came out of, just going sentence by sentence and trying to break some of my own patterns in that, and use repetition in some different ways. And then the other thing that happened specifically with the poem Winter was I had so much trouble in 2020 writing or really reading poetry. I was just reading so much news and like doom scrolling. And so I'm really thankful to this editor, Swati Khurana at Asian American Writers Workshop, who started editing this flash fiction series. She asked me to contribute. So that piece actually started off as a piece of flash fiction. The initial version of it was quite different and not that good. And so it took several iterations to sort of find itself. And part of that was also thinking about listing and why am I drawn to lists? Yeah, thank you for that question.
And maybe if Fagan and Kathy could also talk about form in their book, that might be a nice follow-up question.
Yeah, I think of this book as particularly narrative, and so the sentence is extremely important. I took a lot of cues from my nonfiction writing friends in making these poems. So of course the challenge was to make verse rather than an autobiographical essay. So I used various kinds of strategies to break the lines. And usually those lines are broken along in terms of sort of groupings of poems. And so they look similar across the book, certain groupings of the poems. But otherwise, I just, I've always adored sentences, and no matter how lyric my poems have been, the sentence seems to me to be primary. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
This book has a 2-line poem and it's got a 17-page poem and all kinds of forms. Although very many of the poems started as or remain as syllabic, which is an interesting form to me because it's not rhythmic. You can't hear the rhythm of a syllabic line. And that's one of the fun things to do with it, to measure a kind of equal portion of language, but let the cadence vary line by line by line. I was thinking in some of the poems you heard tonight about letting go of syntax, actually, or of a kind of linear, orderly syntax, and letting things, is in the one poem, melt or elide or slip or slide, or a sentence not quite be finished before the next one began, and letting that kind of tectonic movement onto the page. That's an interesting way to think about form. But I like the math of the thing. I like syllables. I like the counting of some kind of orderliness in a poem. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. So, it, as a poet now of outrage and feeling and world sympathy and what are the precursors for you?
Precursors, as in
Poets before you that
preparations.
no, not your preparation.
The other,
poets.
all of them, whether they are, you know, pointedly doing a political thing or a poem about frustration or outrage or
Excuse me, I'm so
accusation.
sorry to interrupt, but could you please use the mic because on Zoom we're having trouble hearing you. So if you could just step a little bit closer, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Sarah Arvio asked me, since I'm pissed off, who are the precursors of pissed offness in poetry? Again, it's not really the subject matter that who provide me precursors as much as it is a kind of music or an engagement with language or the solving of a certain or the confronting of a certain dilemma rather than poets I turn to for subject matter. Okay, but when I do, it may be somebody like Merwin in, you know, poems he was writing in the late 60s and 70s, especially, maybe somebody like Merwin, and maybe somebody like Adrienne Rich in the 70s and 80s. It may be somebody like Gwendolyn Brooks, whom I'm writing about again. I can't get away from writing about her remarkable trilogy, Riot, that terrific, scary book. It's hard to know how to be full of rage and make that somehow artfully suitable, not pretty, but a crafted thing. Those are a few. There are many, many. Chen would have a different list and Kathy would have a different list. You just got called on.
And list a little bit. Maybe some of the poets I just mentioned in the last response too. I mean, Ocean Vuong, Solmaz Sharif. But yeah, I mean, some of my teachers as well. Araceli Skirmay, Martina Spada. I just, yeah, I mean, they're poets who give you so much permission, and that might be permission in terms of subject matter, but it's also permission in terms of form and sort of risk-taking in kind of breaking habits of thought as well on the page. But yeah, similarly, so many. I mean, like, think of Neruda, Lorca, Tracy K. Smith, Jericho Brown. Yeah, so many.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, but poet of outrage. I don't know. But I do have poets that I go to regularly, of course. I do think that maybe one thing, speaking about bad hobbies specifically, one thing that I might have done with this book, and I mentioned that nonfiction writers were extremely influential in the writing of this book. I think that I also maybe returned to my roots in some ways. I was a student of Phil Levine's and that kind of working class sensibility and the willingness really to be angry, be inelegant, address issues that are hard, if not necessarily autobiographical, certainly helped with the making of this book. And of course, all the poets that Chen and David have already mentioned, wonderful poets.
I actually have a question for Kathy. I'm curious about the memoir poetry connection in your book, and I'm wondering about like what that was like when you were drafting the poems. I'm imagining poems were probably taking on lives of their own. And how did you stay faithful to the more like memoir, autobiographical part while also attending to the needs of the poems?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think in many ways, the poems arose out of a kind of necessity. I was living with my father for 5 years before he became too ill to keep him at home. I have a full-time job. And at the beginning, the poems started as a way for me to deal with that, not only with his illness, but with our differences. I hadn't lived with any of my family since I was 17. He's a very different human than I am, with very different values. And so it was just a way of my grappling with what happened to us on a daily and weekly basis, things that he would say, ways to sort of learn about him and love him in a mature way, as opposed to a childish way. During that time, my mother passed on the other side of the country. And so then there was that. And so I was also reading a great deal of memoir at the time and thought, okay, but I'm a poet. I'm not going to write a memoir. Let's see what I can do with this material. And as I say, there are poets, confessional poets, who helped me to sort of shape the prosaic qualities of the work into verse. I hope. Thanks for that question.
Do we sign books?
There's one
Oh, okay.
last hand.
One last hand.
Do you actually think poetry does nothing?
That's not the end of that sentence. In the Auden, that's not the end of the sentence. Poetry makes nothing happen, semicolon. And then it's something like, it is a happening, a way of happening, a mouth. That's it. That's it. Yeah. Of course it does. It may not be immediate. It may not have the result that you want, but the making of the poem itself is a thing of action and engagement, and the putting of a beautiful thing into the world when we could be putting more ugly things into the world makes something happen, damn it. That's just me.
Thank you all so much on Zoom and in here. Don't forget Martha Collins, Aaron Casedo Kimura, and Nathan McLean will be reading on October 19th. And join us on Zoom for the gala next Thursday, 9/22. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, everyone who tuned in out there. And you guys stay here, buy books. Thank you so much.